This is the Fifth Estate winning headlines, your media police post. In this segment, we summarize some of the headlines that you may have missed this morning, but we also take a look at the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Today is the 24th of November 2020 and I am 2J.
I'm JM.
And I am GK. In case you missed the headlines, here they are. In the Daily Nation, is he the hunted man? In the Standard, BBI reggae plays on. And in the Star, why Kinoti is reviving Kiamba murder cases. Let us begin with the most topical, I believe,
Yes.
And that is with the Daily Nation and the Star. Is he the hunted man? And on this, the Daily Nation is asking whether old wounds are being revived. Deputy President William RUTO, in an interview in February, predicted that there was a cabal of powerful political operatives that were working to revive the 2007-2008 post-election violence cases.
Yeah.
And yesterday, DCI gave a statement saying that they had interviewed some witnesses and those witnesses were going to give statements on the violence, and the RUTO camp obviously is not happy with this. Now on this, the DCI is saying that the cases were never closed. On the post-election violence that did happen 13 years ago. However, they heard word on the ground that there was renewed cases of intimidation and all sorts of things. Among these, 118 cases were filed. 72 were homicide, 44 forceful displacement of persons from their homes, and the rest were related to gender-based violence, mostly gang rape. Now, I have one thing to say about this, is that maybe this is a plan to finish RUTO politically. That's what some are saying. But perhaps we're using RUTO's own devices, because just last year, he's the one who started raising the political temperatures with his plans of assassination, or that people were trying to assassinate him and things like that. And then with the interview in February, he tells us that ICC cases would be revived and it would be a plot. But maybe somebody somewhere has said, okay, well, let's put your money where your mouth is and let's see whether there is any proof there. But if citizens are feeling unsafe in the regions in which they live, I think DCI has every right to investigate what is going on there. And the political hotspots of Rift Valley are somewhere to watch out, because that's always where the conflict tends to happen. So yeah, that is the Daily Nation. And the Standard, I think, is
the
adding
Star,
to it.
the Star picks up on a lot of the same issues. I'd say the only difference is that they then create the link between the renewed ICC case with Paul Gashero as that, kind of defining thing that has maybe brought this back to the forefront. And for me, I pretty much see this as a 1 + 1 = 2 thing, in the sense that I don't understand why the DP camp is so surprised that this is the trajectory that it is taking or beginning to take. Because I think it's a simple act of logic. I think if we look at some simple truths that we know to exist, that the DPP and the ICC both said that there was not enough evidence to prosecute back in 2012. And they said that this led to the withdrawal of charges. But remember, withdrawal of charges does not mean that they cannot be reignited again. And the second thing is that Paul Gashero was wanted by the ICC for witness intimidation. And of course, as I said, he was RUTO's lawyer. So therefore, I think the only thing that makes sense is that if Gashero has now testified or will begin to testify before the ICC that he did commit acts of witness intimidation, I mean, the only logical thing is that it opens the door for fresh prosecutions. And of course, then you have the same thing happening on the ground in Kenya, where if the witnesses know that somebody is beginning to admit that they were intimidated, then the opposite side would want to go and then re-intimidate them again to keep them quiet. So I think...
But politically, this is, I think,
dangerous.
Going to prove to be a dangerous precedent. Opening up this ghost of ICC. It wasn't particularly a very proud moment for Kenya from a perspective of sovereignty. Putting in sending out an African person to a kangaroo court internationally. As a way of fixing political opponents, I fundamentally disagree with it. There's something in the practice of democracy called mutual toleration. And it requires that as participants in a democratic system, we all treat each other with some sort of toleration. Not as enemies, but we see each other as opponents, as legitimate contenders to the executive.
May they honor this code. We have a 3-part criteria. that we will use to break down the headlines. We will ask ourselves, is it topical or speculative? Is it repetitive or groundbreaking? And is it thoughtful or just plain lazy? I find that they're both topical.
Yeah.
However, speculative. I don't know that DP is directly the hunted man. It's very easy to draw the parallel, but however... And
then on the Star, they asked the question, why Kinoti is reviving Kiamba murder cases. I think it's quite boring, a little bit simplistic.
So we can toss the Star?
Yeah, I think we toss the
Star. We'll keep the Nation for now. Is he the hunted man? Because it has some source of mystery there.
Yeah.
Let's move to the Standard.
Yes, so BBI Reggae plays on. The signature launch, we're told, is due to happen tomorrow at the KICC when President Uhuru Kenyatta and ODM Raila Odinga will preside over that launch for the BBI Constitutional Amendment Bill. The bill, Junaid Mohammed says, is not mandatory to be published and to be gazetted per se at this stage, but they say that they will avail it to Kenyans tomorrow as the signatures kick off, and they're aiming for 4 million signatures, not just 1 million.
But
4 million
for the avoidance of doubt.
For the avoidance of doubt, for Ahmed Nasser and co, and all these naysayers who think that, and PLO Lumumba, who think that, and Gladys, who think that that BBI is not going to solve our problems. And that's it's a long and short of it.
So it's interesting. I still feel like nobody's actually taking up the no mantle quite decisively, right? I feel like DP still seems to be at the table of consensus and negotiate. But I think, someone has to come out outright so that when we go to vote for the referendum, somebody clearly occupies either side.
And it's exactly what you're saying, coming out decisively, in the no camp, but coming out and saying that these are my issues. This is what I disagree with. This is why I think BBI will not solve our problems. But currently, it's just people whining for no sake, and they're just disagreeing for disagreeing's sake, which is quite disappointing.
Interesting. So let's see. So we're still sticking with the reggae theme, which I find to be quite boring. I would prefer to give it to the Daily Nation. I think I would have stopped and bought that.
Sure.
Yes, that's true.
So Daily Nation gives us our winning headline. On to the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country, where we also have a 3-part criteria. We ask ourselves, is it humorous or dry? Is it satirical or pessimistic? And is it effective or just plain lazy?
Yes.
Can we begin with the Standard?
Yeah, so here we've got a pessimistic cartoon by Gado. Caricatures of... this looks like a teacher or an administrator of education, and there is a reporter standing by, and the setting is a classroom under a tree, on the blackboard there, and in a bubble says, "We are making progress from 1 laptop per child to 1 mask per child," referring to the promise by the Jubilee government before they came in that they will have laptops for all children. But let me tell you what happens in politics and in political marketing, especially when you are pitching for office. You're allowed to sometimes make these grand promises.
But you have no intention of
delivering. And then you end up with desktops. It's okay. It's fine.
And listen, we had to shift goalposts. We're now in a pandemic. They need masks
more than a laptop.
Absolutely.
Okay, there's nothing wrong with a little bit of dark humor sometimes.
Which I love. So we're going to keep the Standard.
But I just know where Gado is coming from, and it's such a dark place.
Yeah.
But anyway.
He's not taking it the way we are.
Exactly.
Right? Let's move to the Daily Nation, where we have Ndula. And Ndula has drawn characters of Uhuru and caricatures of Uhuru and Raila. And they're desperately trying to fit a square peg into a BBI round hole. Those saying no, those opposing BBI. And they're at the bottom with their spanners and everything, trying to make sure that BBI fits.
Again, goes back to, we just need to articulate.
The beauty here is it probably might go in, it looks round already.
Yes. So it's going to happen whether we want it to or not.
Pende usipende wa Kenya.
It is what it is.
Tutapitisha.
Okay, so what's in the Star?
In the Star, okay, now this I call pessimistic. We have a drawing of a young man, I believe, and a drawing of a young woman.
And his head is a ticking time bomb.
Yeah, his head is a ticking time bomb. He is sagging his trousers, they're below the belt. She is pregnant, also a ticking time bomb with a bottle of alcohol in her hand. And I believe the young man is smoking. And the caption there is teen pandemic with lots of TikTok signs around it. So I think, he's depicting teens having parties, drugs, engaging in and stuff outside of marriage. I'm not going to get into that.
Yeah, but I mean, I have many things to say about this. The only thing I will point to is I think we need to approach this from a place of understanding. These kids going out to do this stuff means that they obviously are going through stuff in a pandemic and they don't know where to take this energy. But I don't know whether arresting and things like that is going to solve it. I think if we all look back to when we were teenagers, we did some things that were fun that maybe you would be arrested for now. Given that there's a pandemic.
I know, I agree. I'm like morally conflicted about all of this, but more importantly for me is the way Africans behave. So our parents are going to resort to prayer rather than, as you're saying, GK, the understanding. I think if our parents don't understand what happens on social media, then there's no way to reach out to your children and bring them in. So I think it is an issue of, we live in the 21st century. Social media defines how we interact. So I think we need to understand it.
As you say, GK, we really have to approach this with understanding. As Prof likes to say, young people, he says, their hormones usually pump like a disco, pumping like a disco. And so if you're not able to harness that energy and put it into good use, then unfortunately it ends up getting destructive. And I think during this whole period, we haven't done a good job as parents, as people now in our adult stage in terms of getting young people to do something constructive with their time.
All right, so good commentary there. Shall we give it to the square peg in a round hole?
GK, I feel like you want to give it to the Standard.
I do want to give it to the Standard.
Okay. In the interest of dark humor.
Yes, there you have it. Gadu gives us our winning cartoon. And now for our final thought. But before we get there, please remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel.
And now our final thought. This week, as we begin to look at political theorists and some of the ideas that they have espoused. So today we look at The Second Sex by Simone de Beauvoir. And she was a French existentialist and feminist philosopher. And she wrote The Second Sex in 1949 to investigate the popular definitions of femininity. So she begins in the outset of her book by asking, what is woman? And she agrees that man is considered the default, while woman is considered the other. And thus humanity is male and man defined, and that woman is not defined as herself, but as relative to the male. And she concluded that these definitions have been used to suppress women throughout the ages. And for de Beauvoir, the views of individuals are socially and culturally produced. Femininity isn't inherent. It is a construct that has been learned through socialization in an effort to keep men dominant. And so her argument is that one is not born, but rather becomes a woman. And she says that is, or maybe we could argue that is still valid today. So she argued that women have been historically treated as inferior and secondary for 3 reasons. And she explains that society teaches women, 1, to fulfill males' needs and therefore exist in relation to men. 2, to follow external cues and seek validation for their worth. And 3, that females have historically had fewer legal rights and therefore have less public influence. I think I agree with all 3. And so she uses a comparison and says that women or girls are treated like living dolls. And by this, she meant that a doll is a powerful a powerful tool of identification. And so through it, girls learn to identify with the condition of being dressed up, being made pretty, being oohed and awed over, while not having any agency of their own. So you learn to objectify yourself just as men objectify women. And so the doll is submissive, and its role is to be dressed up. When you hold your doll, you tell it its secrets, you comfort it. The doll comforts you when you're lonely. The doll stays at home on a bed when you go off to school. And she argues that women have that same kind of situation as they grow up. That as a woman, your role is to attract a husband with your beauty. It's to maintain it so that he doesn't leave you. And it's to listen quietly to his problems and wait at home for him while he's at work. So you're there to be an accessory, whether in plastic, flesh, or blood. Very intense stuff. And so then she says that even if you chose not to be married, that you still are held to these male standards through these external pressures of dieting, of fashion, of beauty. And so she believes that women need to recognize these social constructs in order to have the freedom to escape from them. So for her, I think having voice and having agency is what will take women away from these constructs and lead them to something more freeing. I don't identify as a feminist. I think feminism is a lot of Muzungu rubbish. But I do resonate with some of the things that she says in the book, and I think that they are indeed still valid today.
Now she talks about patriarchy and how society has over time been gradually more and more rooted and steeped in patriarchal culture. And so she says, men position in society as they occupy positions of power, they've used the institutions of marriage, of inheritance of property, to really sink in this culture. And so throughout history, patriarchy has been strengthened by these structures. And as males come, or rather in the past, as males came to be seen as the active force in creating life, the rules of society also changed to consolidate the power of this patriarchy.
Yes.
And one major shift was the development of private property and familial inheritance. And that contrasts with earlier societies, she tells us, in which all property was held communally. But patriarchal societies and the cult of the male then came to glorify this private property, allowing for the accumulation of wealth within one family, and particularly in the domain of the man. And so since man now carried the family line and its property, the woman was excluded from any inheritance. The woman, therefore, barred from acquiring property, became a sort of property in herself, even a thing, instead of a human being treated with her own sense of agency. And this transition from communal to private, male-owned property not only alienated woman from man, it also alienated her from society as a whole. Another institution that perpetuates this culture is marriage. And through marriage, man kept control of the family inheritance, which is still the case today. Now, marriage not only controlled where the inheritance went, but also dehumanized the woman even more, she says, making her into but another asset. So, for example, young women were closely controlled historically, and this is still the case in a lot of societies, either by a father or an older male relative. And once married, this control was then handed over, passed over to the husband. And in some places, the institution of marriage even denied women the right to property if her husband died. This sometimes is also the case in our society. And she gives us an example of an ancient Greek institution known as epiclerate. And this forced women, if widowed, to marry the eldest male relative in her husband's family. So the property would remain in the hands of the patriarchal line. And this custom, we know, is still practiced in even some of our ethnic communities here in Kenya.
Very true.
I'll end it there.
Wow. Reading this book, I was surprised by the things I read, but also like TJ, I don't think I'm a feminist. If a feminist means to want to be like the man and reject my femininity, I don't want to do that. But it was interesting to read her, Simone de Beauvoir. I liked a number of things. One of them was that she said that her goal was to prove that women were not born feminine, but they were shaped by 1,000 external processes. She shows how at each stage of a girl's upbringing, she's conditioned to be that passive, dependent, repetitive, inward self. And she says that the bourgeois woman now performs 3 major functions: to be a wife, to be a mother, and entertainer. And so she says no matter how illustrious you choose to be in one of those stages, you will still be incomplete and have some kind of profound frustration. And she says even to those who take less conventional forms of work, such as prostitution, you still must submit to the imperative that is defined by the male.
Yes.
And she says the most sort of complicit female in this otherness, this relating to the male, is in marriage. And she says that she finds that it's difficult for women to break free from femininity because they feel unwilling to sacrifice security and comfort that comes with being married to a man. And so we see even now the acceptance of the slay queen and these terms as you don't want to work, but you will get money from a man to, keep your lifestyle and things like that. So de Beauvoir identifies the economic underpinnings of female subordination. And she says that if a woman can support herself, this is the root of liberation. And only in work can she achieve autonomy. Now, this one also comes with a caveat, because you find a situation where, as a woman is peaking in her career, her biological clock is also telling her, you know, these are the things you need to do. Thank God for modern science, that you can delay this for a few years, but even then society keeps telling you, you know, at what stage you should be doing some of those things. So you're constantly being defined in relation to other things, as opposed to what you might actually want to do. And so she has an interesting section on production versus reproduction. And she says that women are both treasured and reviled for their reproductive function. And de Beauvoir explains that one of the central problems of the female situation is the difficulty of reconciling women's reproductive capacity with her productive capacity. So her productive capacity is her ability to actually work, to go out there and contribute to her society. But on closer inspection, we're told that Simone finds that reproduction and production are not mutually exclusive. So that a woman's reproductive capacity should not stop her from fulfilling her role in actual society. And we see that now. As labor has gotten cheaper, you can afford your nanny, you can rearrange the nuclear family so that you can go out and work. But the thing that triggered in my head was this trauma of old age that she talks about. So as a woman, if you lose your reproductive capacity, does that make you less of a woman? And what happens when that happens even at a younger age? And so do you lose your primary purpose and therefore your identity? It was quite disturbing.
Oh, that's a catch-22.
It is the trauma of that. So it was really interesting. I think the thing I will take away from is her contradictions. She dated a famous philosopher called Sartre. And she once said that my greatest achievement was my relationship with Sartre. And so you would see for a high priestess of this feminism to define herself by her relationship with a man seems really odd. But there were many contradictions, I think, with her work. And I think many of her arguments may have been a little bit self-defeating. For instance, why should women be against motherhood? Or why should we be envious of male qualities and dismiss our female ones? So there was a lot of questions that it brought up, but I think everyone should pick it up. Definitely. And I will end with this. On a day where we had a winning headline from the Daily Nation and a winning cartoon from the Standard, de Beauvoir's liberation was in her ability to experience and to write. And rarely in this life can a woman find room of one's own because she is buried in chores and the daily grind. But when women are given a chance to speak, our true essence is revealed, our vulnerability, our honesty, our truth. And this is our strength. And so Dr. Mutahi, one of our mentors here, told us that the Western woman has come very far in sort of this journey of feminism and empowerment. But here in Africa, we are still trying to find our voice in patriarchy. And this effectively is still trapping women. But African feminism can be different. It doesn't have to bash our men. It can embrace them. It can liberate them. And I think here's to cultivating those new voices here on the continent. Have a lovely evening, but also subscribe to our YouTube channel. Find us on TV. We're on GoTV, Patriarchy to Air, and Starbucks.